And so as you were preparing to go, now you're working. You had a couple of guys that you mentioned in the book. You know, I'll start with the first one. I'm going to mention three of them. Major Fagan. Fagan? Is that how you say
Fagan,
it?
yeah.
Fagan. Major Fagan. He sounds like one tough customer.
He was tough. I mean, I was scared. I'd see him coming down, the trail or anything like that. I'd jump in the jungle, because I was scared of him. Well, everybody was scared of him because he was tough. He just drove us. He found out the Japanese had marched with full packs in a 24-hour period, marched 39 miles. He said, we're going to beat that. And we marched 50 miles with full packs there on New Caledonia. And we would walk up the hills and trot down the hills that came down there. And we went 50 miles. And I don't know whether it's any kind of record book or anything, but we was proud of it.
Yeah.
So forth.
I don't know if it's a record book either, but I know it hurt.
Yeah.
Now you also you tell a couple stories in the book about him. But he had no problem putting people on bread and water.
Oh, no problem, no problem. In fact, I was put on bread and water. I had a buddy there that was went through the parachute platoon with me right there, and he nearly got us killed and everything. I won't give him his name, but he passed away several years ago, but I don't want to say anything.
We don't want to incriminate his actions.
Well, when we was going through parachute school, his name was, I'll tell you his name, last name. His name was Harmon. So when we lined up alphabetically and everything we did, well, he was always right behind me. So when we went to parachute school, we wound up together, because of our names being real close to one another. Well, anyway, now, when we jumped, the Marine Corps jumped from the plane, we dove out head first. Their theory was that when you jump out and that parachute opens right there, you kind of swing with it right there. Well, the Army jumped them out feet first and came down and so forth. So we jumped out head first. While we were training there out here in Camp Gillespie, that's where the parachute school was. And we lined up and to make our first jump. Well, Harmon was behind me. Well, in the plane we called it the Blue Goose. Now we had to borrow that from the Navy because the Marine Corps didn't own any planes itself. So we used the Blue Goose. So they took us out there in a truck, the guys that had volunteered to go into the parachute school. And that truck driver drove us out there, and the barracks and the offices and everything was on the top of this hill, and below was the runway, and that's where we jumped into that area right there. That truck driver drove up there and stopped real fast. He said, "They're fixing to jump. You guys want to watch?" And so we all jumped out of the truck. There's about 10 or 15 of us, jumped out of the truck and watched them. It flew over. Man, here they come diving out. One of them was coming down fast. He was flailing like this. His parachute didn't open. And so just before he hit the deck, that parachute opened. He had to pull out his reserve chute. Now the reserve chute was on the front, and it didn't have a pilot chute on it. So when you pull a ripcord, you're supposed to pull out that silk yourself. Well, it wasn't silk; it was nylon. Well, he was pulling that out. Just he got it filled out. He hit the deck, and a Jeep was on its way down there, and they put him in that Jeep, put a parachute on him, got him on the plane. The plane went up there, out he came again, and that truck driver said, "Any of you guys want to go back to boot camp?" And 2 guys got back on the truck and went back. And I thought seriously about joining them, And
yeah, that's not a good initiation into parachute jumping, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, we had to pack our own chutes. We learned how to pack chutes, and every step you took at parachute school, you had to be running. If you weren't running, and an officer or an NCO would catch you, you were in trouble, So every step we took, we learned how to pack chutes, ran up and down. I got where I could pack a chute in 12 minutes. Well, one day they said, "You're going to pack a chute today and you're going to jump tomorrow." And I said, I better take a little bit more time. So it took me 30 minutes to do that one. Well, that night, what was that Indian's name? But was it
Ira Hayes.
Ira Hayes. He was in my platoon. You heard of Ira Hayes. His hip raised the flag on the Eagle. He was real quiet, and there was another Indian in there with him. And that night before we jumped, that guy jumped off and hollered gung-ho, and broke both of his ankles. So that ended his parachute. But Ira was he was a good Marine. He was quiet, he never said much. And I'd talk to him, because my mom was a Comanche Indian, and I had some Indian blood, and I'd tell him that, and we became close friends. But he was so quiet, he's just a great guy, but he just quiet. Well, the history of what he did, and what happened to the poor guy.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we came out, and that first jump we made the jump. And when I came out, I dove out. When my chute opened, I was standing on another chute below me. Well, it was Harmon. He should have been above me because he was coming out there. Well, we didn't think much about it, I just thought that's the way his jumping was like. Well, the next day, we jumped again, and we came up. We were tangled together. And their chutes, when they're slanting up like that, air was going up too fast, when holding the chute. And when we hit, man, it was like a ton of bricks hitting, man, it hurt and everything, because that chute wasn't able to, those chutes weren't able to hold us up. So we hit the ground pretty hard. So the jump masters and the guy on the deck watching thing, they said, "What happened?" And I don't know. They didn't ask anything of Harmon, It was always me looking at, Well, anyway, in fact, they was looking at me because I didn't even have boots on there. One time, I said, "Where's your boots?" I said, "Y'all don't have any that'll fit me." So they finally got me a pair, a 6 size, and told me to wear 4 pair of socks, That was the first boots I had. Well, back to Harmon. Well, the next time we jumped, I came out bruised up and everything. When we jumped, my chute, the shroud lines had tangled up in my boot, So I whipped out the K-bar knife and cut those 2 strands of rope, to let me down. Just before I hit the ground, I got my feet down first, They come running over to me, and "What is going on there? What's happening?" I don't know. And so what had happened when my parachute, when I jumped out or dove out of the thing right there, I was facing the plane, and my static line was playing out between my legs. And so that's where my foot got tangled up in the shroud lines. Man, they came up there and they decided I was too light to be in a parachute, And so the sergeant over there at the loft where we packed our chutes, he and the officer were talking. They said, "Well, he's just too light," and And I was standing there talking. I said, y'all can't kick me out. I want to stay in this outfit. I want to stay in it. And so that sergeant, he said, why don't we put him in a Army-Navy canopy? Now, the Army-Navy canopy was only 26 feet diameter. And the ones we used, the nylon, the ones we used were 28, just a bigger canopy and everything. So this guy took an Army-Navy parachute, took it out and put it on the carriage, I forget what they call it, where you folded your chute and put it on there. And so here I am with a parachute, made out of silk instead of nylon. And silk reacts a lot faster than nylon does. So when that chute opened, I got a pretty good kick out of it. Well, when we came out, and that day we were going to jump with weapons, and so they gave us all a rising gun. You ever heard of a rising gun?
No.
It was about as worthless as a grease gun, so we called it a grease gun. It was a terrible weapon. They outlawed them in the military right quick. Well, anyway, I had one of those, and when I went out the door, Harmon hit me and knocked that rising gun down, and it went down and stuck in the dirt. And this was our fourth jump, and the sergeant said they were considering just really to drop me, send me back to boot camp to be assigned somewhere else. I, with tears in my eye, begged them to let me stay. Well, and then the sergeant said, I'm going to go up tomorrow and watch and see what is happening. And so he went up there and found out what was happening. Well, here, we're coming down this white line in the fuselage of the plane, and then the white line was right there leading out the door. So we were supposed to come down and make a sharp turn and dive out. Well, I was coming down there and going out the proper way. Harmon was coming down there, and he was cutting across, and he was going through the door at the same time I was, and it was knocking me against the side over there. And he was just knocking me out. Chute was opening before mine was opening. And so we got that straightened out. And that wasn't the only trouble I had with Harmon, but that's a different story. Or maybe I shouldn't bring it up here. So
you actually talk about when you did finally get your first jump, everything went good, and you said, I had never made first string in any sport because of my size, but when they pinned those wings on my chest and shoved a rifle into my hands, I'd at last made first string. With that rifle in my hands, size no longer seemed relevant. I had made the team and found a home. The Marine Corps filled all my dreams and all my needs. Harmon actually ended up getting you in trouble.
Yeah.
Right? While you were in New Caledonia.
Yeah. Well, I won't go into the pink house, but I do in the book, don't I?
I don't know.
Our day off was Wednesday. 1st Battalion got Wednesday off. They didn't let us all off at the same time because they didn't want another Pearl Harbor type thing, because the Japs were still on the offensive at that time. So he got where he would go down there every Wednesday, and he fell in love with one of those girls, and she fell in love with him. Well, he went in there and he didn't get the bus, but last truck going back to base, and he didn't get back in time. So he had to hitchhike. I don't know how he got there, but he got there about an hour after roll call and everything. So when he showed up, well, Fagan just put him on 5 days bread and water.
Fagan don't play around.
Yeah. Well, when you would buy something over there from the PX, you couldn't go in and buy one bar of candy or one can of beans or anything like that. You had to buy a whole box. So on his third day, I went over and got me a Joe Boy. Now, Joe Boy was a non-chocolate. You couldn't have chocolate candy in the tropics because it melts, you know. So they had this nougat covered with peanuts, and it's called Joe Boy. So I went by there one night, and I opened up, and I was eating one of them, and I hollered at him through the barbed wire thing. He was in a tent, and it was kind of in a clearing in the woods, you know. He said, "Harvey, throw me one of those things. I haven't had anything but bread and water for 3 days now." I said, "No, I'm not going to throw you. That's against the rules." "Oh, come on, please. I would do it for you. Just come on." So I looked around, took two of them out, and threw them a little line. "Corporal of the Guard." Fagan had seen me. Well, he came over and he said, "Put this guy in there." And Ott Ferris happened to be the corporal of the guard at that time. And he said, "Well, we can't. We're all packed up. You know, we don't have, there's just one bunk, what thing you? Cot in there, and the rest of them are all packed and ready to go." And said, "There's no place for him to sleep." He said, "Well, take that guy out and put this guy in there." And so the next day, I'm sitting there, and I'd already had a couple of loaves of bread and water. He came by with a box of candy, and I said, "Come on, throw me one of those things." He said, "No, that's against the rules. I don't want to get in trouble."
Oh.
So he never did throw one over to me.
Cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Now, you were going to get sort of written up for that, and Lieutenant Hall, who you had a lot of respect for, I'm going back to the book here. So now you're checking in with Lieutenant Hall, and he's supposed to write you up and put this in your permanent record.
Yeah.
And he says, "Harvey," he said with a document in hand, "I was ordered to write you up, but I can't put it in your records as all our records have been stowed away to remain here. I'll have to carry this paper with me, and it will surely get lost in the jungle before we get back to civilization." Again, I got a knowing smile and a pat on the back. "Now get out of here and forget what has happened. Get your gear in order. I think we're taking a boat ride." I gave him the smartest salute possible and said, "Thank you, sir. I appreciate what you've done for me." I think I might have skipped to my tent, filled with a deep joy and the deliciousness of being a Marine. I left my troubles behind me and soon got to feel the thrill of combat. I realized soon after, in the heat of battle, that the harsh, demanding training of that Major Richard Fagan, Sergeant Ott Ferris, and Lieutenant Ralph F. Hall put us through paid off. We performed well under fire. Ferris and Fagan received wounds in the Battle of Iwo Jima. Lieutenant Hall died in the Battle of Iwo Jima. I shed bitter tears when I heard the news of his death. He was a great Marine. At Iwo, Fagan earned the Navy Cross. As we fought for Bougainville, Sergeant Ferris did some amazing things for which he received the coveted Silver Star. Later, at the Battle for Iwo, he earned the Bronze Star and Purple Heart medals. Then he went on to win his second Silver Star and Purple Heart during the Korean War. Heck, this guy hung around to fight in Vietnam in the 1960s. A Marine's Marine, I found serving with him a great honor, one of the high points of my life. Even today, 70 plus years later, we get together from time to time. What do we talk about? Of course, the war and our buddies of that bygone era. So I thought that was just a great leadership story about how Lieutenant Hall just said, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna shred this document," and it never happened.
Yeah.